Guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Sacramento Kings and what they realistically should do this offseason. Now, the Kings finished ninth in the Western Conference at 40 and 42, but that wasn't really the issue. The issue was you fired your head coach who just won coach of the year and brought your team that, was in the bottom of the West for years and years to the playoffs. And, you fire him and then your star player, De'Aaron Fox, says, trade me. I will not sign the extension this summer. I don't care how much money you offer. Trade me. And by the way, I want to go to San Antonio, and that's the only team I'm willing to go. So you trade De'Aaron Fox for Zach LaVine and basically the 2031 first round pick from Minnesota. And yes, that pick later on could be, a good pick, but that pick is in 2031 and right now it's 2025. And right now the Sacramento Kings are, a mediocre team. And being a mediocre team is not the best, plan, especially in the NBA. It's probably worse than being, in the bottom of your conference. And if you look at the Sacramento Kings salary, you're paying Zach LaVine $47 million next year. And then he has a player option of 48. Now, I think he would probably opt out. Is that when you trade him? Because, his value is probably going to be lower, obviously, because he has 1 year deal. So do you trade him mid-season next year, or are you going to trade him this summer? And then Sabonis to sign an extension, he's going to get paid, $45 million next year and then 48 the year after. Sabonis is, a pretty good center. I think he is underrated in certain aspects, but, is he worth almost $50 million? That I don't think so. And then you still have DeMar DeRozan under contract for 2 more years at $24 million next year, about $25 million the year after. I think that contract's more tradable. I do think you're gonna have to attach maybe a couple second round picks, maybe a first round pick, but I think you could get away with maybe 3 second round picks just because it's a shorter deal. DeMar is still an established veteran. He still shows he has that clutch gene. It's just, defensively, his spacing, it just doesn't work out. I do like the Malik Monk contract. He's only going to get paid, $18 million next year. 20 after that, but he does have a player option of 21 million in 2027. Do I think he's going to stay with the Kings by then? I don't think so. I think he signed with the Kings because his friend De'Aaron Fox says, hey, let's run this together, college teammates, we have something here, let's build it. So I don't know. I don't think he stays with them. And then a big thing you're going to have to deal with, paying Keegan Murray. Are you willing to pay Keegan Murray max money? Now, to me, I do not think Keegan Murray is worth that max contract. Are you willing to pay, almost 200 million or 190 million for a player who's really not a third option on a contender team? To me, he's really passive. He doesn't really have, that drive in him that we see, especially from, a top 5 pick drafted. He's still a really good role player. I do see him more as a Cam Johnson type player. And, Cam Johnson's, just average almost 20 points, I think around 18 points a game. And the rookie you drafted, Devin Carter, we really didn't see him too much because of that injury. And when we did, it really didn't look that good. And, I'm really not one to judge on rookie guards coming into the league because most of them don't play good. And that's just, a fact. They just struggle. I think a big one that we saw was Darius Garland. People were like, wow, this guy is the worst player in the NBA. And now look at him. He's an all-star. He's a max contract in the NBA. Does he still have his struggles, especially this playoffs? Yes. But, he's not the worst player in the NBA. Like, he was voted. Now, what should you do as the Kings organization? The first step, and I mean this has to happen before the season starts, is you have to move DeMar DeRozan. He cannot be on this team in October when the season starts. I don't care if you have to attach, 3 second round picks, which I think most likely will happen. I see a lot of, Michael Porter Jr. swaps, but I don't know if that's something as a Nuggets organization you do. I know you're going to have to move him because you can't Nikola Jokic's prime like that. At the same time, does DeMar DeRozan really, help you, playoff wise? Maybe regular season, he helps you more than Michael Porter Jr. And, Michael Porter Jr. did have that injury in the playoffs. He was not shooting the ball well. And defensively, he's never been a good defensive player. DeMar DeRozan shoots, worse from three than probably, a worse defender than Michael Porter Jr. And I think the second thing you should do as the Kings organization, sit Zach LaVine down and, talk to him and say, hey, we're going to be trading DeMar DeRozan. And we're probably going to be worse. You're going to be a free agent in 27, 28. Do you want? And if he says, hey, I just want to play basketball right now and, whatever happens, happens, but at the same time, shop around, his value, could be higher if you trade him, before the deadline. I think the second trade that could be more realistic is, trading Malik Monk. Now he's on an excellent deal, nothing really crazy. I think he's undervalued in this league, on a pretty good deal. Next year he's going to be making around $18 million. The year after 20, but he has a player option after that of $21 million. And I think he'll probably opt out because I don't see the Kings, a contender playing team at that point. He took that, deal because he thought the Kings organization were back. You have a head coach that finally, made that playoff push. You pushed the Warriors to 7 games, and yes, you lost. And, but it took Steph Curry, a Hall of Famer, to have one of the best games we have ever seen to push y'all and beat y'all in game 7. And then the next year, you just, quit and fire him. Your star player, De'Aaron Fox, asked to be traded. You really don't get good value. And now Malik Monk's like, I took a pay cut. I wanted to play with my friend. Everything's gone. Do you realistically see him staying after that? I don't. I think you should move him as soon as possible too. I guess you could hold on to him, capitalize on value. If he averaged, 20 points a game, next year, maybe you could get, 2 first-round picks versus just, 1 first-round pick. Or maybe you could let's talk to the Houston Rockets. What if we get one of those Suns first-round picks? You never know. They do need, some scoring, some playmaking. Malik Monk, did play point guard a lot of the times this year because, De'Aaron Fox was, hurt. And then the trade request, he did pretty good in my opinion. Now, another thing they should do is call Zach LaVine, sit him down and tell him, hey, this is the direction we're going. We're going to be trading DeMar DeRozan. We're probably not going to bring in, another 20-point per game scorer. We're probably going to trade Malik Monk. You're going to be with this team next year, but you have a player option after that. Do you realistically see yourself, playing with us? And if he, gives the right answer and says, no, I don't see myself, or hey, I'm just going to play basketball and, whatever happens, happens. That's your key to be like, okay, I have to trade him as soon as possible. Because if you wait to the trade deadline, his value is only going to go down and a team's just going to trade, bad contracts with, maybe young players that didn't work out and maybe a couple seconds. Right now, you could maybe get a first. It may not be, a lottery first, or, it may be not what you want, but if you could get something back for Zach LaVine, just take it. Another thing that they're going to do, and I think they should do, even though it's going to be really hard to, justify it, is, pay Keegan Murray that max rookie extension. Now, Keegan Murray is a really, really good player, but I don't know if he's worth, almost $200 million or $190 million, whatever he's going to sign. It's just because he can't really create his own shot. He doesn't really have that drive in him. He's more of that catch and shoot and defend, which is really good. And he's going to be in this league for a really long time and make a lot of money doing it. But paying him, max money to be a third or fourth option on, a really bad team right now or a mediocre team. But I do think they have to do that, especially if they trade DeMar DeRozan and they're most likely going to trade Zach LaVine. You're probably going to keep Malik Monk for at least another year. I don't see him getting traded unless the package is, really good, unless it's for some young talent or, really high draft capital. I don't see them doing anything with Dante Sabonis. His contract is just, I wouldn't say the worst contract or like an untradeable contract, but you're definitely going to have to attach a first or maybe even 2 firsts and like some draft capital. And I don't see them doing that, especially. I would just, wait it out. Wait until he says enough's enough. You trade him because, he's going to be with y'all regardless till 27, 28. And he's getting paid, $42 million next year, 45 the year after, and then $48 million. Is he worth it? I don't think so. All these contracts in the NBA are only going to go up. So it's hard to say, well, this player is worth it. This player, unless they're, top 5 in the league, because I could see Shea getting paid, $340 million. And people are like, oh, well, he's not worth it. He just won MVP. His team's in the finals. What if he wins the finals already? Is he going to be worth it? Because I don't know. We just saw Jaylen Brown get paid, $300+ million, and he just won Finals MVP. Yes, he's not an MVP, but he showed up in the playoffs. He guarded the opposing team's best player, locked him up, exposing him, and kind of justifying why Nico Harris traded him. People are like, whoa, he's on like the worst contract now because he's not worth 300 million. But Jason Tatum, he's got paid 300 and 15 million, 14 million, whatever it was. And he's never won MVP. He's never won finals MVP. But we know he's the best player on the team. We know he's the reason why, they won the finals too. So it's hard to justify, well, this player is not worth 48 million, 50 million a year. The salary's only going to go up. The longer you hold that contract buyout, the longer or the more you're going to have to pay. One last thing they should do, and I think this is the biggest, is play Devin Carter as much as possible. This is your first round pick that you took last year's draft. And I know he was hurt and he didn't debut to January, and it did not look good. It didn't look comfortable, and it may be because of that injury. And rookie guards are normally struggle when they come in, but you don't know until you play him more. And I know Malik Monk is probably going to start, and I think he should. I think Devin Carter should be playing almost 30 minutes a game, if not more. We have to see, is this guy worth keeping, or should we just trade him while his value is the highest? And I know it's probably not a first round pick type of high right now, but can you get 3 second round picks, 2 second round picks, and maybe another rookie that you see more potential in? We don't know until you play him more. Now, you have the 42nd pick in this year's draft class. Now, maybe they could find a steal at that pick. We don't know. Maybe they could find a point guard that they can't believe they fell this low. Or you find someone that you bank on their potential, and 2-3 years from now, we're like, how did this guy fall to the Sacramento Kings? And now the Kings are, back. I don't see that happening. I think you should, trade DeMar DeRozan before the season starts. Sit Zach LaVine down, tell him where the direction's going, and go from there. Shop him around too, because his value is only going to go down. Especially if you wait to the trade deadline, his value is going to be, probably the lowest. We don't know worst season because, he doesn't have a true shooting guard playing point guard as Malik Monk. 3, play Devin Carter as much as possible. Play these young players as much as possible to see if they're going to be, a long-term piece in this organization. But that's all for this time, guys. Let me know what you think the Sacramento Kings should do. Should they, blow it up and trade, as many veterans on their team as possible? Should they just run it back with this team? Should they trade for another veteran and, try to make a playoff push or, play-in push and go from there? Let me know, guys.